The massacre of more than 100 innocent Syrian people, most of them women and children, today sparked the United States and several other countries to give Syrian diplomats the boot. Witnesses say on Friday Syrian troops and affiliated militias shelled, stabbed, and shot at point-blank range dozens of innocent people in one of the worst displays of violence since the uprising began last March. The Syrian regime claims terrorists carried out the attack. But the U.S. State Department spokeswoman says the United States hold the Syrian government responsible for the slaughter. Of course, we cannot confirm. Officials from the United States, along with Great Britain, Germany, France, Canada, and others, now telling Syrian diplomats they have hours to leave their respective countries in another attempt at getting Syria to stop killing its own people. Of course, the United Nations estimates that Syrian troops have killed more than 9,000 people since last March. Connor Powell with the news. He's live for us in Jerusalem. And Connor, what type of impact can expelling these diplomats have exactly?
Well, Trace, this move to expel Syrian diplomats is really more symbolic than anything else. But in the past few days, it does appear the international community is ratcheting up diplomatic pressure on Syria and on President Assad. But so far, it hasn't had much of an impact. But on Sunday, the UN Security Council did vote to condemn the shelling and the deaths and the attack on the Syrian town of Hula, which left more than 100 people dead, including women and children. But those types of diplomatic maneuvers have so far, Trace, done very little to stop any of the violence. It's been going on for more than a year now, Trace.
And Connor, the special envoy to Syria, Kofi Annan, met with the Syrian president today. Any progress at all on that front?
It doesn't appear there was a whole lot in the way of progress. Kofi Annan did meet with President Assad earlier today. Annan's been there for 2 days in Syria, meeting with Syrian officials. The only thing that Kofi Annan did say that he and President Assad did agree to was the need for humanitarian aid to continue flowing into Syria. But of course, that need for aid and that agreement on the need for aid comes as Syrian forces are attacking civilians and that there is essentially a civil war going on there right now. But Kofi Annan did call on both sides to put down their weapons, and he is trying to push a ceasefire agreement that has essentially been abandoned in the last few days and never really took hold. But at the time, right now, the violence is continuing and diplomatic efforts really don't seem to be doing a whole lot. Trace?
Connor Powell live in the country that borders Syria. Connor, thank you. Joining us now, former State Department Deputy Special Envoy during the President George W. Bush administration, Christian Whiten. He is currently a principal for the consulting firm DC International Advisory. And Christian, is it overstating the case to say that Russia and Iran are enabling this? I mean, Russia's providing weapons, we know that. Iran, many believe, providing forces. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so. Syria really is the junior partner of a broader relationship with the Iranian government. And Iran has supplied forces in the Quds Force, which is Iran's essential paramilitary force. Revolutionary force has been on the ground in Syria providing technical assistance to the Syrians in cracking down harder. And Russia, of course, is another key part. Russia giving arms, just recently being caught giving arms to Syria again. But Russia is the chief protector of Syria at the UN. And of course, the Obama administration, for better or worse, has chosen to pursue its diplomacy primarily at the UN and hitting a roadblock from Russia and China.
You hear the kind of backroom talk now, Christian, about military intervention, U.S. military intervention, NATO military intervention. How tricky exactly would that be in your estimation?
It runs, well, there are a number of risks involved. You know, we're fresh off the experience of Libya, where we started with a no-fly zone, but of course that's just another way of saying we're going to go to war. No doubt that the U.S. military and its allies can do that somewhat effectively, but this could be another open-ended military commitment at a time when the U.S. military and American voters are somewhat fatigued with war after war after war. So there's a lot that could be done in the middle that hasn't been done yet, and I would say that would be a better approach.
Yeah, also at a time we're 5 months ahead of the election, and if you're saying the next step might be for somebody to pick up the phone and call President Putin and say, hey, how about we get this thing stopped?
Well, unfortunately, yeah, the president, of course, has a relationship with President Putin, but so did his predecessor, George W. Bush. And one problem Western diplomats and Western leaders often make is over-investing themselves in their relationships with, shall we say, less than perfect democratically elected leaders, which I would describe Putin as. So Russia really, they're looking at this news. They were comfortable, though, with the violence before what happened in Hula, and they're probably not that uncomfortable with it now. So there's not a lot of leverage. And also, Syria has plenty of munitions of its own, some resources of its own. So bringing Russia on board at the UN wouldn't necessarily improve this situation. Really, what we need to do is enable the rebels to take care of matters for themselves better.
In essence, you're saying the UN has been ineffective and it's time to actually go to those who are on the ground.
I think so. If you look at the Annan process, first of all, Kofi Annan himself has very little credibility. Dictators know him quite well and are not afraid of him. As UN Secretary General and as a lower level official before that, dealing with situations like this in Bosnia, in Rwanda, elsewhere, he did exceptionally poorly. And so now, people aren't really afraid of him, concerned with him. He's been on the ground in 2 days. He also said that both sides should lay down their arms, which implies some sort of moral equivalence between the two sides. But if you have the rebels lay down their arms, they're just going to be slaughtered, because we know for a fact that Assad and his forces aren't going to do it. Yeah. So, working with allies like Jordan and Turkey, two close allies in the region, to arm these guys would be better.
Former State Department official Christian Whiten. Christian, good to see you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Trace.